The email came on a Tuesday. Michael Anderson got a lot of email. Most of it was people asking him to visit places that did not exist, or places that existed but had a family living in them. He had a folder for those. He checked it maybe twice a month, usually at 2 in the morning, usually while eating something out of a bag. This one had a photograph attached. He opened it because the subject line was empty, and empty subject lines were rare. People who wanted something from him always put something in the subject line. Please read. Huge opportunity. You need to see this place. This one had nothing. The photograph loaded slowly. It was a hospital corridor, wide, institutional, the kind of place that had been built when they still built things to last 100 years. Half the ceiling had come down. The tiles lay in the corridor in long gray slabs, and above them, the ribs of the building showed through, pipes and joists and a hanging cable that had stopped hanging a long time ago and now just pointed at the floor. There was graffiti on the left-hand wall, a tag, illegible, in red. 2 gurneys lay on their sides near the end of the shot, and one of them had lost a wheel. It was a real photograph. Michael knew that the way he knew a lot of things now, after 4 years. The light was wrong for a fake. Nobody faking a place shot it in flat gray afternoon light through a broken window. Underneath the photograph, there were 3 lines. Millbrook State Hospital, Bradford County, Pennsylvania. Go there if you have the guts. You are nothing but a liar. No name, no signature. The address it came from was a string of numbers at a service Michael had never heard of. He read it twice, put the phone face down on the arm of the couch, and went to bed. He did not reply. He wanted it on the record, later, that he had not replied. He had been an adult about it. He had let it go. He got up 40 minutes later and read it again. The comment came 8 days after that. By then, Michael had almost stopped thinking about it. He had a video out. An old guy works outside Patterson, 2 hours away, lights on the whole time because the building still had power for the security cameras, and it was doing fine, not great, fine. The comment was near the top because 140 people had liked it. So, what happened? Couldn't find the address I sent you? Michael stared at it for a long time. The thing about that comment was that nobody else understood it. It sat there under his video, looking like nonsense, and the 140 people who liked it had liked it because it sounded like it meant something. That was the whole trick. The man had taken something private and put it out in the open where it could not be answered without being explained, and explaining it would mean admitting there was something to explain. Michael typed a reply, deleted it, typed another one. He never remembered what he finally posted. He remembered the 400 comments underneath it. The argument ran 2 days. On the 3rd day, somebody dug up the name, and after that, it was not an argument anymore. It was a date. Tyler put the countdown on the channel page. Tyler did that. Michael did not ask him to, and did not stop him, and there is a difference between those 2 things, but not a large one. Danny wrote nothing. Danny never wrote anything. They drove up on a Friday, 3 hours north, then another 90 minutes, then 20 minutes of dirt road that Tyler's car was not built for. The car was a 9-year-old Impala that smelled like the inside of a gym bag, and Tyler had a policy about the windows, which was that they stayed up. Tyler talked the whole way. He talked about the video, then about a different video, then about a guy they both knew who had faked a whole series in a house in Kentucky and gotten away with it for a year. Every 20 minutes or so, he said, "This is the one, man, this is the one," and every time he said it like it was the first time. Michael sat in the passenger seat with his phone in his hand. The signal died past Scranton. He kept checking it anyway, waking the screen, watching it go dark, waking it again. There were 14 unread messages in a thread with his sister that he had not opened in 9 days. Danny sat in the back. He spoke once, near the end, to ask whether they could be out before dark. "We can't be out before dark," Tyler said. "What are we filming? A picnic?" Danny saw it first. It came up through the trees, the way big buildings do. Not all at once. A roof line, and then a wall, and then the whole thing. 5 stories, 2 wings, a tower in the middle with a clock face on it that had lost its hands. Michael took out his phone and opened the email and held the photograph up next to the windshield. It matched, not the corridor. You could not see a corridor from outside. but everything else did. The tower, the way the left wing came forward and the right wing did not. The 2 rows of blown-out windows on the 3rd floor, where somebody had gone along with a rifle a long time ago and taken his time about it. The place was a wreck. It was exactly as much of a wreck as the man had promised. Tyler was already out of the car with the camera up. The red light was on. Millbrook State Hospital, Michael said, and his voice dropped without him deciding to. 4 years of muscle memory. Opened in 1911. When they shut it down, nobody's really sure how many patients were still inside. He had no idea if that was true. He had gotten it off a forum, and the forum had gotten it off another forum. They went in through the service door on the north side. The lock was still in the frame. The hinges were gone. Inside was nothing. Michael understood that within about 10 minutes, and it made him angry. It was a ruin. It was an ordinary, unremarkable, thoroughly documented kind of ruin, and there was not one single thing in it that he had not filmed somewhere else. Plaster on the floor in drifts, water damage running down the walls in long brown fingers, a ceiling that had come down in the west corridor and taken the light fixtures with it, graffiti everywhere, and bad graffiti, tags and initials, and one enormous crude drawing that Tyler filmed for a full minute while laughing. Somebody had been here, lots of somebodies. There were beer cans in the day room and a fire pit in the middle of the floor where kids had burned a chair. He sent me to a party house, Michael thought. 400 comments, and he sent me to a party house. They went up, 2nd floor, then 3rd. Michael stopped in a corridor on the 3rd floor and looked at the ceiling, which had come down, and at the gurneys near the end of it, which lay on their sides. He opened the email. It was this corridor. Same tag on the left wall, red, illegible. Same 2 gurneys, same missing wheel. So the man had been here. He had walked this floor with a camera and then gone home and typed, "You are nothing but a liar." Michael stood there for a while with the phone in his hand and his jaw tight enough to ache. "Mikey," Tyler from somewhere behind him. "You good?" "Yeah. You look like you're gonna cry." "I'm fine." He filmed the bluff on the 4th floor at about 6 in the evening with the light going gray in the windows. He took the camera from Tyler and stood in the middle of the corridor and put the light on his own face and started talking. He talked about what they used to do at Millbrook. He talked about records that were never kept and records that were kept and then burned. He talked about a ward on the 3rd floor and said that of the patients who went into it, none of them ever spoke again. He gave a number because numbers made people believe things. 47, he said. He had made it up standing there. 47 sounded better than 50. 50 sounded like a guess. 47 sounded like a file. The camera was running. Tyler stood off to the side, grinning, not making a sound, just grinning, and Michael could see him, and Tyler knew Michael could see him. Danny stood farther back with his flashlight pointed at the floor and said nothing at all. All 3 of them knew. All 3 of them were in the same corridor, and the camera was running. Michael finished the line. "Okay," he said, and stopped the recording and did not look at either of them. That was good. Danny drifted toward the stairwell. "I think that's enough." "It's not enough. There's nothing here, man." He was not arguing. He was just saying it. "We got the whole building. I don't want to do those stairs in the dark." Michael looked at him. Later, much later, when later had stopped meaning anything, he would come back to that moment and see it clearly. Danny was right, and Michael knew he was right, and that was exactly why he walked. He went down the corridor, 20 yards. The 3rd or 4th door on the right, he never knew which, and it did not matter. The door was gone. Not open. Gone. Somebody had taken it off its hinges years ago and leaned it against the corridor wall, and it stood there now with its number plate still screwed to it, warped and gray, and Michael stepped over the fallen screws in the doorway and went in. The room was a room. A bed frame with no mattress. A closet with the door hanging, a window with 2 panes out, and a 3rd one starred. He filmed it. He did it slowly because he was still angry, and slow work was what he did with anger. He ran the light along the base of the wall where the paint had blistered. He got in close on the closet hinge. He got the window with the last of the daylight in it, which was actually a good shot, the only good shot he had gotten all day. "Mikey," Tyler, out in the corridor, already moving. "Come on, there's a whole other wing. Coming." Footsteps, 2 sets, going away, unhurried. Somebody laughed at something, and it echoed the way everything in that building echoed, all the way down and back. Michael lowered the camera, turned, walked 4 steps, and stepped over the fallen screws and out through the empty doorframe into the corridor. The light hit him like a slap. He put a hand up before he understood what he was doing. It was that bright. It was fluorescent light, flat and white and even, running the full length of the corridor above his head in a straight, unbroken line, and after 3 hours of flashlight and gray dusk, his pupils simply could not take it. He stood there, blinking with his hand up and his heart going hard in his chest for a reason his brain had not caught up to yet. Then he saw it. The ceiling was whole. The long gray slabs were gone off the floor and back where they belonged, and the fixtures were in them, and the fixtures were lit. The walls were green, not brown streaked, not blistered, not tagged. Green, that flat institutional green, and the paint was new. The floor was clean, not swept, clean. It threw the lights back at him in 2 long white ribbons that ran away toward a vanishing point. The gurneys stood against the wall on the left, 6 of them, upright in a row, evenly spaced, wheels turned the same way, sheets folded. It was the same corridor. He knew it the way you know a room in your own house. Same length, same doors, same windows in the same places. The tower stairwell down at the far end where it had always been, and nothing in it was broken. Michael turned around. There was a door behind him. It was white, and it was closed, and the handle was polished, and the leaf of the old one that had been leaning against the wall for 20 years was gone. He did not scream. He wanted that on the record too, later, though there was nobody to put it on the record for. He did not scream. He said, "Tyler." The word came out of his mouth and stopped. That was what it felt like. It left him, and it went about 2 feet, and it quit, and the corridor did not take it, and there was no echo. The building had echoed all day. Tyler had been shouting into stairwells for hours because he thought it was funny. Michael put his hand on the handle and turned it, and it turned smoothly, and the door swung in. Inside was a hospital room, a bed with a mattress on it, made up, the sheet pulled tight and tucked under, no wrinkle anywhere. A closet with both doors shut, a window with all its glass in, and a curtain in front of it, and the curtain was parted exactly down the middle so that the 2 halves were the same width. There was no second door, there was no broken frame, there was no camera bag, which he had left on the floor by the bed frame 90 seconds ago. He stepped in, turned in a full circle, stepped back out. He shut the door and opened it again, same room. He shut it and opened it a 3rd time, and then he did start running. He ran to the stairwell at the end of the corridor, and the stairwell was there, and it went down. He took it 3 at a time and came out on a corridor. It was not the 3rd floor. It was not any floor. It was a corridor with green walls and a clean floor and the lights on, and he ran the length of it and found a stairwell and took it down and came out on a corridor. He did that for a while. He could not have said how long. At some point, he understood that the stairs were not stairs. They were just another way of getting from one corridor to another one, and after that, he stopped taking them. Then he tried going back. That was the one that broke him, though it took a few hours to finish the job. He turned around in a corridor he had walked maybe 2 minutes earlier and started back the way he had come, and he walked, and the far end did not get closer. He counted 100 paces. He turned and counted 100 back. The second 100 put him farther from where he had started than the first 100 had. He tried it again to be sure. Then he tried it again because being sure was not enough. You can go forward, he thought, standing in the middle of it with his hands on his knees and his breath tearing. That's it. That's the whole thing. You can go forward. He did not give up that first hour. He did not even come close. He did not give up because he had not gotten frightened yet. Not really. His head was still working the problem, and it still believed there was a problem to work. Buildings were big, floors looked alike. He had crossed into the other wing without noticing. He had come down one flight too many. There was an answer, and he was going to find it, and when he found it, he was going to be angry about how simple it had been. So he turned the camera on. He did not decide to. His hand did it. The red light came up, and the screen came on, and Michael pointed it at his own face and started talking, and then realized he was holding the flashlight too and did not need it because the corridor was lit. He put the flashlight away. "Okay," he said. "Okay. So I'm on the 4th floor and I've lost the guys." His voice was low, automatically low. For anybody watching this is not a bit. I want to be really clear. This building has power right now. This building is not supposed to have power. He turned the camera around and walked it slowly down the corridor and held on the far end where the lights ran together and the floor ran together and there was no wall. "Look at that. There's no end to it." He stopped the recording. He watched the file save, and the thought that went through him, whole and clean and unashamed, was, this is going to do numbers. He was still Michael Anderson then. The building was too neat. He noticed it in pieces, the way you notice that somebody has shaved off a beard. Not all at once, just a growing sense of wrongness that resolves into a fact. The doors were all ajar, every one of them, and every one of them by the same amount. He walked along, putting his hand into the gaps, and his hand stopped in the same place every time. 4 doors, then 10, then 20, the same gap. The gurneys stood against the walls in rows of 6. Always 6. Always the same distance out from the wall. He found a day room with 12 chairs in it, 6 on each side, and he paced the gap between 2 of them, and then paced the gap between 2 others, and they were the same. There was a corkboard on the wall with nothing on it, and 16 pins in it, 4 rows of 4. There was no dust. That was the one that got under his skin and stayed there. Not someone dusted. There was no dust anywhere, on any surface, in any room, and there had never been any. The tops of the door frames were clean. The gap under the radiators was clean, and there were no marks on the floor, not scuffs, not scrapes, not the black arcs a gurney wheel leaves on linoleum when somebody swings it too hard around a corner. In a hospital, there are always those. Michael got down on his knees in the middle of a corridor and put his cheek almost on the floor and sighted along it the way you sight along a plank, and there was nothing. It was perfect all the way to the end. He got up and pushed a chair over. He did it hard and it went down with a bang that went nowhere at all, and he stood over it, breathing fast and feeling better than he had felt in hours. 20 minutes later, he walked into a day room with 12 chairs in it, 6 on each side, evenly spaced. He did it again in the next one, and the one after that. He knocked chairs down. He dragged gurneys out from the walls. He pulled a curtain off its rail. Then he walked and turned and remembered that he could not go back and understood, slowly, the way you understand bad news, that he would never once see any of it again. He was not vandalizing a building. He was leaving marks nobody would ever find in a place that did not keep them. At some point, he looked at his phone. 11:47 at night. He looked again a while later, and it said 11:47 at night. He walked for what he was fairly sure was an hour and looked again. 11:47 at night. He watched the screen for a long time, waiting for the 7 to turn into an 8, close enough that his own breath came back off the glass, and it did not turn into an 8. The battery said 63%. He stopped looking at the phone after that, but he thought about it later, more than he wanted to, that of all the numbers in that building, the one it had chosen to stop on was 13 minutes short of midnight, and it was going to be 13 minutes short of midnight for the rest of his life. The first announcement came while he was standing at a junction trying to decide between two directions that were the same direction. A click, then the hiss of a public address system opening from the ceiling, from everywhere in the corridor at once. His heart stopped and then went off like a bird in a box. Visiting hours have now ended. We ask that all visitors please make their way to the exit. Thank you. A woman's voice, flat, trained, pleasant, airport pleasant. There was a little upward lift at the end of it, the lift people put on when they are telling you something nice. Michael started shouting. He stood in the middle of the corridor with his head back and his phone up in the air, like a man flagging a plane, and he shouted until his voice cracked. I'm here. I'm in here. Can you hear me? Please. The hiss went on for 2 seconds after the voice. Then a click, and it closed. He kept shouting anyway. A minute, 2. Then his voice went and he stopped. And when he stopped, he understood. It was a recording. It was a recording somebody had made 50 years ago in a room somewhere. A woman with a good voice reading a card, and the building had played it because the building played it. Not to him, not for him. The building did not know he was there. He heard the giggle for the first time while he was asleep on his feet. He was leaned up against a wall with his eyes shut. He had been doing that for a while. 5 minutes here, 10 there, never lying down, because lying down felt like a decision. It came from behind him, a child, short, muffled, the sound of somebody trying to hold it in through a hand and not managing. Michael's eyes came open. He turned around, and behind him was the corridor, lit end to end, clean floor, green walls, doors ajar by the same 4 inches, empty all the way to where the lights ran together. There was nowhere to hide in it, not for a child, not for a cat. Hello. Nothing. He started walking toward it. 10 steps, 20. The far end did not come closer. It never came closer. That was the rule, and he knew the rule, and he walked anyway. And at 30 steps he stopped because he had felt something go wrong in his chest. It came again, farther away. He ran with his shoes shrieking on that clean floor, and he shouted while he ran. And 2 minutes later he was bent over with his hands on his thighs and his lungs full of glass. And there was nothing, and there had never been anything. That was when he understood the shape of it. In this building, there was exactly one thing that was not the building, and it was always behind him. It was always in the only direction he could not go. He could not sleep. It was not that he was too frightened to. He would have taken frightened. It was that the lights never went off, and after a while he understood that this was not a detail. There was no night in this place. There was no dimming at the end of anything. The tubes overhead put out the same flat white at what should have been 3 in the morning as they did at what should have been noon, and his body, which had spent 31 years being told when to shut down by a sun, simply stopped being told. He tried. He got a few minutes at a time on his feet, the kind of sleep that is not sleep, where you come out of it with your heart already going. He sat on the edge of beds in rooms and let his head hang until his neck woke him. It was never enough, and it was never going to be enough, and after a while, it stopped even taking the edge off. Then, at some point, the debt started coming due. The first one was movement. Something went past on his right, low and quick, and when he turned his head, there was a corridor with nothing in it. It happened again on his left a while later, whatever a while was by then. After that, it happened all the time, always at the very edge of him, always gone by the time he got there. Then it was his name. The lights hummed. He had never once noticed the hum, and then he could not stop noticing it, and inside it, buried in it, there was a voice saying, "Michael, patient and unhurried," over and over. He stopped and listened hard, and it went away, and he started walking, and it came back. Then it was the time. He would be at a junction, and then he would be 400 yards farther on with no memory of the walk, not a blank, worse than a blank, a join, the way a bad cut joins 2 shots in a video, and you can see the join. Then it was the company, somebody walking on his left, half a step behind, matching him. He could feel the space they took up. He never once turned to look, because looking was how you found out, and he had gotten past wanting to find out, and somewhere in there, he stopped in front of a door and put his hand up to his own face, for no reason, the way a man does, and his jaw was smooth. No stubble, nothing. He had shaved on a Friday morning in a bathroom in another world, and he had no idea at all how far back that was. A week, a month, a season. There was nothing on his face to measure it with. He stood there rubbing his own chin with his thumb like an idiot, back and forth, waiting for it to be wrong. So he made a rule. It came to him the way good ideas come to exhausted people all at once and shining. If it stops when you look at it, it is not there. And it worked. That was the terrible thing about it. It worked beautifully. The movement on the right went away when he looked, so it was not there. The voice in the hum went away when he listened, so it was not there. He walked for what might have been a day inside that rule, and he was almost calm, and being almost calm was the best thing that had happened to him since the doorway. Then the rule got hungry, because the giggle stopped when he chased it. So the giggle was not there, and he had been running after nothing, screaming in a building where nothing was, and the announcement stopped. It came and it went, and when he shouted at it, it did not come back. So he stood in the middle of a corridor and worked at that for a long time and could not make it come out because the announcement had a body. There were speakers in the ceiling. He had stood underneath one and looked up at it and seen the little holes in the grill. It was the only thing in the whole building that had a place it came from, but so did his name in the hum. That was where it went bad, not the seeing things. He could have carried the seeing things. It was that he had built the one tool he had left, and the tool did not know the difference. And now every single thing that happened to him had to be sorted by a man who had not slept, using a rule he had invented while hallucinating. He was not afraid of the building anymore. That went around then, and he did not notice it going. He was afraid of being wrong, and the building did not have to do anything about that. It did not have to open a door or move a wall or send anything down the corridor after him. It only had to keep the lights on. The floor was very bright, and it reflected everything. He had known that since the first minute, and it had not mattered. Now it mattered because he had started walking with his head down. Looking ahead had stopped being useful. Ahead was always the same. So he watched the floor, and in the floor there were the lights. 2 long white ribbons running away on either side of his feet forever. And at some point, on his right, something moved across one of them. Michael stopped. He looked up. The corridor was empty. The right-hand side was empty. Doors ajar. Nothing. He looked down. It was still there, in the reflection, low, crossing the light, a darkness with an edge to it. It slid. It stopped. It slid again. Michael crouched, slowly, without taking his eyes off the floor. It stopped too. They stayed like that a long time. Michael on his knees on that perfect linoleum, looking down into the light at a shape that gave up nothing, because a reflection does not tell you what it is a reflection of. There was a mass. There was a place where it ended. That was all there was. "Who are you?" he said. It did not move. "Who are you?" It did not move, but he knew it had heard him, because things that have not heard you do not hold still like that. Then it slid, and it was gone. And the floor was 2 white ribbons running away forever, and the corridor was lit, and everything was exactly the way it had been. He walked with his head down after that anyway. He could not make himself stop. He saw the man about a day after that, maybe 2. The words had stopped meaning much. He was coming up on a junction with his head down when something crossed the light in front of his feet, and he looked up, and ahead of him, at the far end where the corridor crossed, somebody walked from left to right, and the first thing Michael did was apply the rule. Not there, movement at distance, in the corner of the eye, in a building where movement at distance was the most ordinary thing there was. He knew exactly what this was. He had a whole system for what this was. The floor had already shown him the system was not enough, and he kept using it anyway because it was the only one he had. Then he looked, and it did not stop. Walking, not hurrying, not strolling. The walk of a man going somewhere he goes every day. He had something in one hand, a folder or a phone, and he was wearing a dark jacket, and Michael did not see his face. It took less than a second, and what Michael felt was not fear. It was relief. It came up through him so hard that his knees went and he had to put a hand on the wall, and his eyes flooded, and for one whole second, the last however many hours, simply did not exist. "Hey!" He was running before the sound was out. "Hey, stop! Please! Hey!" The man did not stop. He did not turn his head. He did not slow. He did not break his stride by so much as a step. Michael's voice never reached him, or it did. He hit the junction in under 10 seconds. He was sure of that. He would be sure of it for a long time afterward. He turned right. There was no one there. In front of him was a corridor, lit, empty, and it was lined on both sides with patient room doors. Door after door after door, left and right, packed close, every one of them ajar by the same 4 inches, running away from him in 2 converging rows until the rows met. Michael turned around. The junction was gone. Behind him was the same corridor, the same doors, the same light. The room had not been the trap. This was. He started opening doors. The first 30 he opened at a run. Each one was a hospital room, a bed, a closet, a window. The bed made, the sheet tight, the curtain parted down the middle into 2 halves of the same width. Then he slowed down and started counting. 40, 60, 112. At 112, he went into a room and sat on the bed and put his face in his hands and cried without making any sound, which is a thing he had not known a person could do. Then he got up and tore the room apart. He pulled the sheet off and threw it. He dragged the mattress halfway onto the floor. He heaved the closet onto its face with a crash that died before it reached the wall, and he stood in the middle of the wreck, breathing hard, and he felt good. He felt like a person. Remember this room, he thought. This is your room. This one's yours. 40 doors later, he walked into a room where the bed was made. He did not check whether it was the same one. He had stopped being able to make himself do that kind of test. He stopped counting, and then, a long way farther on, 300 doors, 500, a number that had stopped being a number. He opened a door, and the bed was not made. He stood in the doorway. The sheet was pulled back on one side. There was a dent in the pillow, and along the near edge of the mattress, there was a long, shallow depression, the kind that gets pressed into a bed by somebody sitting on the edge of it for a long time. Not once, many times. The closet was standing. It's yours. He thought, it's the one you wrecked, but he had put that closet on its face, and he could still hear the sound it made, and this closet was standing. He crossed the room and put his hand flat on the sheet. Cold, Michael sat down on the edge of the bed, in the depression that was already there, and he waited. He faced the door, and he waited, and he did not know what he was waiting for, except that it had a face. Nobody came. When he finally stood up, there were 2 depressions in the edge of the mattress. His was the shallower one. He looked at that for a while. Then he went out and closed the door behind him, quietly, the way you do in a hospital. The second announcement came after that. Same click, same hiss. Michael did not shout this time. He stopped where he was and listened, hard, with his head tilted, because he had decided there might be information in it. Visiting hours have. Then a gap. The hiss stayed. The voice went. 4 seconds. 5. Thank you. Click. Michael stood there. The part that had dropped out was the part that carried the freight, the ward, the floor, the name. It had taken the middle of the sentence and everything the sentence was for, and it had left him the polite ends. He waited for the repeat. Announcements repeat. Every hospital in the world repeats them. He waited an hour, maybe 2, maybe none at all. It did not come. The building started making mistakes. That was how he thought of it at first, because it was the kindest way to think of it. Mistakes could be counted. Mistakes meant somebody had been doing something and had gotten it slightly wrong, and somebody doing something was better than the alternative. The first one was a handrail. It ran the length of a corridor at the height of his shoulder. He walked beside it for a while with his fingers on it before he understood what was bothering him. And what was bothering him was that no patient in a wheelchair, no old woman with a bad hip, no one alive had ever been meant to hold it. It was mounted for somebody 8 feet tall. Then a corridor that was too narrow. Not much. He had to turn his shoulders slightly at the door frames, and standing against the wall in it, in a neat row, evenly spaced, Wheels turned the same way, were 6 gurneys. They could not have come down that corridor. There was no junction they could have come through. They had not been carried in because they were assembled, and there was nowhere for them to have been assembled. They were simply there in a corridor they could not fit through. Waiting, then the numbers. He came into a hall with rooms on both sides and read the plates as he went, because reading things was something to do. 412, then 4 doors on, 412, then 412 again. He backed up until he could see all 3 at once. He stood at the end of the hall and looked at 3 doors with the same number on them, all of them ajar by the same 4 inches, and this was not a loop, because a loop would have been an explanation, and there was no explanation available. Then the window. It was in an interior wall, in the middle of a corridor, with no outside anywhere near it, and it was a good window, wood-framed, wire-meshed like the ones they used in wards. Michael put his hands on the glass and looked through it, and on the other side there was a corridor. Green walls, clean floor, lights on, doors ajar. He knocked for a long time. Then the stairs, which went up 12 steps and stopped at a ceiling. No hatch, no trap door, no seam. 12 steps, a handrail, a landing the size of a doormat, and then plaster. And then, at last, the door in the ceiling. He came around a corner, and there it was, 20 feet above him, in the middle of the ceiling, like something in a bad dream, except that it was not like anything in a bad dream, because it was so correct. It was a patient room door. It had a number plate on it, 209, in the same font. It had a handle and hinges and a little wire-meshed window at head height. There was a fire extinguisher cabinet mounted in the ceiling next to it, level with the door, exactly the distance from the frame that they always were. There were no stairs to it. There had never been stairs to it. There was no floor up there for anyone to stand on and open it from the other side, and it was ajar, 4 inches. Michael stood underneath it, with his neck bent back, and worked that last part through, slowly, because he was slow now. The gap was the same. Whatever set the gap had set this one too, which meant that whatever did, it had gone up there, to a door in a ceiling, over a drop, with nothing to stand on, and pushed it open exactly as far as it pushed all the others. Or it had not gone anywhere, or it had never had to. He sat down on the floor. It isn't broken, he thought. That was the thought. He turned it over and could not get rid of it. Nothing here is broken. It's all finished. It was finished before you came. And underneath that, worse, the one he had been walking away from since the doorway. Nobody who had to walk through this ever built any of it. It was not a hospital that had gone wrong. It was a hospital built by something that had seen one once from a distance and had been very, very careful about the parts it could remember. He left the camera somewhere. He did not decide to do that either. He went into a room and sat down and set the camera on the bed beside him, and when he got up, he did not pick it up, and he was 20 steps down the corridor before he understood what he had done. He stopped. He thought about going back. Then he remembered again, with that flat, dull shock that never quite wore out, that there was no back. And standing there, something came apart in him because the camera did not work. It recorded. He had kept filming. That was the part he would think about afterward, if there was an afterward. He had gone on turning it on and saying okay into it for days, and there were hours on it by now, 40, 80, some number, and not one frame of it was ever going to appear on anybody's screen. Not ever. There was no screen. There was no anybody, and if that was true, then there was no Michael Anderson. Michael Anderson was a channel. He was a subscriber count and a comment section and a voice that held its breath outside a door and said, okay. He was here because a stranger had called him a liar and he had not been able to eat it. 47 patients, he thought. Good one. Where'd you get that? You got that out of your teeth, that's where. The stranger was gone. The argument was over. Whoever wrote that email had moved on to something else within a week and had not thought about Millbrook since. And out there, wherever out there was, the whole thing had already closed over like water. Here, in this corridor, Michael was just a man walking. That was all there was. Just a man in a corridor, and even that was generous. Michael went down onto his knees and stayed there for a long time. When he got up, He could not walk. He did not understand it at first. He was on his feet. He was supposed to go forward, and his legs did not go. He told them. They did not do it. There was nothing in front of him to be afraid of. That was the worst part, and he understood that it was the worst part even while it was happening. A lit corridor, a clean floor, identical doors on both sides. There was no threat anywhere in it, and his body had simply stopped. He started lying to himself, just rest a minute. Then, it isn't bad here. Then, the light's better here. The lies got smaller as they went, because each one had to be more believable than the last, and he had to believe all of them. He arrived, finally, at this. If I don't move, nothing happens. And that might have been true. It might have been the only true thing in the whole building. A man could stand in a lit corridor forever, and nothing would ever happen to him. He was about to accept it when the giggle came. It was in front of him. The same sound. Short, muffled, not quite held in. 30 yards ahead, maybe less. And it was a child. He knew it was a child. There is nothing else a child's voice sounds like. The thought that came was, there's a kid in here, and behind it, how long has there been a kid in here? His legs still would not go. But standing was not possible anymore either, because standing meant leaving that sound in the corridor by itself. The first step his body took without him, the second one he was there for. On the third, the giggle came again, farther off, and Michael went after it. Not because he chose to go forward, but because he stopped being able to stay. The third announcement came while he was walking. Click, hiss, and this time the sentence was in pieces. Visiting hours have ended. Final, Mr. Anderson. To the exit, please. Have ended, Mr. Anderson, please. Michael stopped. The words were not damaged. Every one of them was clean, in the same flat, trained, pleasant voice. They just had no order. The pieces lay across each other, some of them twice, some of them not at all, and to the exit was as far as it ever got. The destination was there, but the direction never came. The building was telling him where to go without giving him any way to get there, but his name was perfect. His name was the only thing in it that was not broken. Right there in the middle of the wreckage, clean and unhurried and correctly pronounced. Mr. Anderson. Michael's eyes filled, and it took him a few seconds to work out why. The building had counted him. All this time, however many days, however many weeks, a number that had stopped existing. No door had opened for him, and no voice had answered him, and no man had turned around at a junction. Nothing in this place had ever once acknowledged that he was in it, and now something had said his name. Michael stood in the middle of the corridor with his hands hanging and understood that he had spent 4 years working for this exact feeling. The hiss did not close. It stayed open while he walked, speaker to speaker, corridor to corridor, always the same distance behind him, patient as a nurse. Then there was a click, and the hiss stopped. Michael halted and looked up at the ceiling because he knew now what came next. The voice was whole, not broken, not out of order, flat and trained and pleasant, with that little lift at the end, exactly like the first night. The hospital is now closed to visitors. Thank you. The hiss held for 1 second, then a click, and every light in the building went out at once. It was a single sound, hundreds of fluorescent tubes going out together from one end of the corridor to the other, and then it was dark. Not dim, dark. He did not make a noise. He brought his hand up in front of his face. He could feel it there. He could feel the air move. He could feel the muscle working in his own shoulder, and there was nothing to see. Not a shape, not a shade of gray where a shape should be. He touched his own nose with 2 fingers to be sure they were where he thought they were, and they were. He got the phone by feel, hip, pocket, thumb, and 2 fingers, the way you do it 1,000 times a day without ever once looking. It came out into his hand, and it was not there. He found the button on the side and pressed it. Nothing happened, or something happened, and he had no way of knowing. He held it up in front of his face at 6 inches, then 4, then close enough that the screen should have been the only thing in the world, and there was no screen. He pressed it again. He held the button down until he felt the small, hard click of it going all the way in. He turned it over in case he had it backwards. There was no light anywhere, not weak light, not far-off light, none. And that was when it came to him, standing there with a phone in his hand that he could feel and could not find. He was not in a dark building. He had been in a dark building that first day, before any of this, 3 hours of it, and it had been nothing like this. A dark building still has a shape. You feel the ceiling over you whether you can see it or not. You know the wall is on your left. The air moves. There was no over. There was no left. He was not standing in a corridor with the lights off. He was standing in the dark itself, and the corridor, the doors, the floor, the 6 gurneys against the wall, the whole clean, enormous machine of it, had never been anything more than something the light was doing. He put his hand out to find the wall. There was no wall. He put the phone back in his pocket, which was a strange thing to do, and he did it carefully, the way you put away something you intend to use later. He waited for something to pass him. He waited for his eyes to adjust. He waited for the lights to come back on, because they had been on since the first minute, and things that have always been true feel like they cannot stop being true. He began to count. 1, 2, 3. He could hear himself breathing. He could hear nothing else at all. No hiss, no hum, none of the 100 small sounds he had never once noticed until they were gone. 4, 5, 6. He shifted his right foot, and his shoe shrieked against whatever was beneath him. 7, 8, 9. And Michael began to scream. There were no words in it. It was not a warning, and it was not a name, and it was not aimed at anybody. It was just sound, coming up out of the dark, going until his lungs were empty, and then filling and going again. It stopped 2 feet from his face. He was the only one who heard it.